Last year's San Francisco 49ers were absolutely elite for fantasy football purposes, finishing top 8 in passing yards, passing touchdowns, rushing attempts, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns. But of course, as a result, this year's 49ers currently have not one, not two, but 3 different players drafted inside the top 24 of fantasy football drafts. Of course, that could all change with a Brandon Aiyuk trade in the coming weeks, but today, in episode 28 of Inside the 20 by Basement Brewed Fantasy Football, let's talk about whether or not we want to smash or pass on Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, George Kittle, Brock Purdy, Ricky Pearsall, Jauan Jennings, Elijah Mitchell, and Isaac Guerendo at their current costs in 2024 fantasy football drafts. Now let's kick this thing off talking about Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is entering his age 25 season, year 3 in the NFL, and he is undoubtedly eyeing up a massive second contract with the San Francisco 49ers. On drafters.com, which is where I play 100% of my best ball, Brock Purdy is currently being drafted as fantasy's QB 13 around pick 114 overall, which is a mid 10th round pick in 12-team leagues. And the first question of today's episode is, do we want to smash or pass on Brock Purdy at that cost? Now, you can debate a wall about whether or not Brock Purdy is a system QB or if he would be as successful if he wasn't in Kyle Shanahan's offense. I don't care. Frankly, if the guy is getting us fantasy football points, that's really all I personally am interested in. And he's been strong in fantasy football. He's averaging over 18 fantasy points per game over 25 career games where he's played at least 73% of the offensive snaps. And for context, averaging 18.1 fantasy points per game over a 17-game season last year would have made Brock Purdy fantasy's QB 6 overall, which is exactly where he ended up. He has a very safe floor. He scores 15 or more fantasy points 76% of the time. He has more games over 21 fantasy points with 8 than he has games under 15 fantasy points with 6. So he has a very safe floor. He has a solid ceiling in fantasy football. It's not elite, but it is solid. He does get you 20 or more fantasy points about 40% of the time with a career high of 29.5 fantasy points in week 13 of last year. And the real key to unlocking Brock Purdy's fantasy football upside is the seemingly rare instances where he has all 3 of Deebo Samuel plus Brandon Aiyuk plus George Kittle all on the field at the exact same time. But when that does happen, Brock Purdy averages 19.1 fantasy points per game. And for context, averaging 19.1 fantasy points per game over a full 17-game season last year would have bumped Brock Purdy up to QB 5 overall. But again, having Deebo Samuel plus Brandon Aiyuk plus George Kittle all on the field for the full game at the same time, that seems to be more rare than a holographic Charizard card, as it's only happened in 14 of 25 Brock Purdy games. So you have a guy averaging 18 plus fantasy points per game with a solid floor, a solid ceiling. He finished as fantasy's QB 6 last year, his first full year as a starting quarterback in the NFL, and now heading towards week 1 of 2024, at least as of right now, as of this recording, there's not a lot of reason to expect much change. He has the same supporting cast, again, at least as of right now, as of this recording. He has the same supporting cast as last year, barring injury, barring a Brandon Aiyuk trade, right? He still has Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, George Kittle. He still has Jauan Jennings. And now the rich got richer, adding 31st overall pick in this year's NFL draft, Ricky Pearsall. So you're taking the same supporting cast that made Brock Purdy last year's QB6, you're adding the firepower of a first-round wide receiver. There's just no reason to expect much change or much of a step back for Brock Purdy in 2024 fantasy football. And indeed, Vegas sportsbooks are expecting continued success for Brock Purdy moving forward as well. He currently has the 9th best odds of leading the entire NFL in passing yards. He has the 3rd best odds of leading the NFL in passing touchdowns, and he has the 8th best odds of winning MVP. And we're talking about a guy currently being drafted as fantasy's QB 13 in 2024 fantasy football drafts. He is a solid middle to low-end QB1 at absolute worst, and he looks like an absolute value pick in 2024 fantasy football drafts, especially for fantasy managers who miss out on those top tier of QBs when you can just wait and grab a guy like Brock Purdy. It makes it really, really easy in 2024 fantasy football drafts to just stock up on running backs, wide receiver, and even your very first tight end in rounds 1 to 9 and feel really, really good about getting Brock Purdy as your QB1 in round 9 or in round 10. He is an absolute smash. His current cost of QB 13 around pick 114, which is a mid 10th round pick on drafters.com. In Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 draft guide, we currently have Brock Purdy ranked at 106 overall, well ahead of his 114 ADP. And just a quick note for the prop bettors out there, and this is something that I just dropped into the betting portion of Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server, which I gotta tell you, for less than the cost of one beer per month, less than the cost of one Starbucks per month at $4.99, the insights and the golden nuggets that we drop into that Discord server on a daily basis are unmatched. You can join us using the link that we left for you down below in the show notes. But here we go. I'll let you in for free right here with this golden nugget. Brock Purdy is averaging 253.9 passing yards per game in the 25 career contests where he's played at least 73% of the snaps. Now, 253.9 passing yards per game over a 17-game season comes out to about 4,316 passing yards, which is more than 440 yards more than his current over-under of just 3,875.5. Likewise, and even more excitingly, Brock Purdy is currently averaging 2 passing touchdowns per game in those 25 contests. And simple math will tell you 2 passing touchdowns over a 17-game season brings Brock Purdy to about 34 passing touchdowns in a 17-game season. That is 6 more than his current over-under of just 28.5. And again, he has the same supporting cast as last year when he tossed 31 touchdowns and 4,280 yards, and now he added the firepower of a first-round wide receiver. Now, of course, all of this could change with a Brandon Aiyuk trade, and maybe that's baked into those over-unders already. Maybe it's hinting and signaling that a Brandon Aiyuk trade truly is on the table. But as of right now, those over-unders look way too low. All right, now, what about Christian McCaffrey, who's currently being drafted as RB1 around pick 1 overall? Is he worth it? Do we want to smash or pass on Christian McCaffrey with the very first pick in 2024 fantasy football drafts? I tried my best. I tried my best to make you think it was even a question of whether or not he's worth it. But of course he is. He's an obvious, absolute smash at his current ADP of 1 overall. Do we really even need to spend a heck of a lot of time here? This guy is averaging nearly 25 PPR points per game in 30 career games with the 49ers, where he handled a minimum of 13 touches. Again, let me say that again. Nearly 25 points per game. He's averaging more than 21 touches per game. He's averaging a stupid 1.3 touchdowns per game during his time with the San Francisco 49ers. The floor is elite if he's on the field. He's getting you 15 or more PPR points nearly 87% of the time. He's getting you 20 PPR points 70% of the time. And the ceiling is out of control. This guy scores 30 or more PPR points in more than 23% of his games. And he has more games over 40 PPR points with 4 He's scored 40 PPR points 4 times, and he's scored under 13 PPR points once. Really don't need to spend a lot of time here. If you're desperate for pessimism, I got a couple things I can throw at you. Christian McCaffrey is entering his age 28 season. He's no spring chicken any longer. He is just 1 year. He is coming off 339 touches, which is the second most of his 7-year career. Plenty of miles on the machine at this point. And depending on whether or not you believe in this sort of thing, do with this what you will, but Christian McCaffrey will be on the cover of this year's EA Sports Madden game. Do with that what you will. Now, the one thing that I will say here is that in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 draft guide, Christian McCaffrey is in the exact same tier as CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase, meaning I will not argue with you if you decide you want to go with one of those 3 wide receivers with the first overall pick. If you're uncomfortable with the mileage on Christian McCaffrey and you want to go with CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, or Jamar Chase, I'm fine with that. I won't argue with you. They're all in tier 1 for a reason. That's why tiers exist in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's draft guide. Still, I am equally as happy to smash on Christian McCaffrey. He's the best. He's the most valuable player in all of fantasy football when he's on the field and when he's healthy, and it's not close. Having an elite running back like that is an absolute cheat code. You just don't find them anymore in fantasy football these days. What about the other running backs in San Francisco, the guys behind Christian McCaffrey? And there's 2 of them that we want to talk about in today's episode. First, let's talk about Elijah Mitchell, who is currently being drafted as Fantasy's RB55 around pick 178 overall, a mid-15th round pick on drafters.com. And we also want to talk about the rookie, Isaac Guerendo, who is currently being drafted as Fantasy's RB67 around pick 217 overall, which is an early 19th round pick on drafters.com. Do we want to smash or pass on either one or both of those guys in 2024 fantasy football drafts? Are you a software wizard? A code ninja? A Forgemaster? Or maybe even just a mad scientist? Then come build your career ladder with Infinity Labs, an award-winning technology company, best place to work, and business of the year with best-in-class benefits and compensation. Visit i-labs.tech. That's i-labs.tech today, where you can learn more about Infinity Labs, our expanding national presence, and why the status quo has no hold on us. Well, let's start out by saying that the RB2 role in San Francisco is about as elite as it gets as far as handcuffs go in 2024 fantasy football. And whoever wins the RB2 job in San Francisco is going to be an elite handcuff in 2024. It's a goldmine offense, being in Kyle Shanahan's system, being behind Christian McCaffrey, a guy who's entering his age 28 season. He's coming off 339 touches, which again was the second most of his career. He's going to be on the cover of Madden, which again, do with that what you will. Now, whoever wins the RB2 role in San Francisco, they're not going to offer standalone flex value, right? If Christian McCaffrey is healthy, if he's on the field, whoever San Francisco's RB2 isn't going to offer much in the way of fantasy football points. But should anything happen to Christian McCaffrey, the RB2 in San Francisco is an instant RB2 in fantasy football with RB1 kind of upside again if anything happens to Christian McCaffrey. This role is going to be an elite end of bench stash for fantasy football managers, and it's going to be an ultra popular, possibly the most popular waiver wire claim, waiver wire pickup if anything happened to Christian McCaffrey during the 2024 season. We're talking about being in a Kyle Shanahan offense that's finished 9th or higher in rushing attempts, 8th or higher in rushing yards, and 5th or higher in rushing touchdowns in 4 of the last 5 seasons, most of which wasn't with Christian McCaffrey. Now, as of right now, it's Elijah Mitchell that is penciled in as the team's RB2 heading towards week 1. And quite frankly, if Elijah Mitchell is still on the team come week 1, he should have a stranglehold on the team's RB2 role. The rookie Isaac Guerendo shouldn't be particularly close to unseating Elijah Mitchell. The only reason it's even a question is because Elijah Mitchell is entering year 4 in the NFL, and he's entering the final year of his rookie contract. And if there's anything we've learned about the 49ers over the last few years, it's that they don't hesitate to trade a running back if they feel like they have depth at the position. And when you consider the fact that Elijah Mitchell is entering the last year of his contract, the 49ers traded up in the 4th round to get Louisville's Isaac Guerendo, who, by the way, is a bit of an older prospect. He's going to be 24 years old. He's already theoretically able and ready to contribute to the team already. And all of that makes it at least possible that Elijah Mitchell is traded before week 1. But if he's not, if Elijah Mitchell is still on the San Francisco 49ers come week 1, it shouldn't be a question. He should have a stranglehold on the team's very valuable RB2 role. And we've seen him thrive when given the chance. He had a very strong rookie year back in 2021. He handled 226 touches for 1,100 scrimmage yards and 6 touchdowns on his way to an RB26 finish in fantasy football. The guy's averaging 19.5 touches and 14.1 PPR points per game in 15 career contests where he's handled at least 11 touches. The problem when it comes to Elijah Mitchell is that it seems like the guy is always hurt. He's never appeared in more than 11 games in a single season, and he's played in just 27 of a possible 51 career regular season games. Again, potentially leaving the door open for San Francisco feeling comfortable to move on, trade him away, and move on with the rookie, Isaac Guerendo. And by the way, if the 49ers do decide to move on and they do move on with the rookie, Isaac Guerendo, there's no sugarcoating it. There's actually some mouth-watering potential when you pair Isaac Guerendo's game with Kyle Shanahan's offense. Now, don't get me wrong, Guerendo's not flawless as an NFL prospect. He had a mediocre college production profile. He's not particularly proven as a pass catcher, and those things can definitely limit a running back prospect's upside in fantasy football. But a very strong NFL combine was specifically what put Isaac Guerendo on the map. The guy's 221 pounds, but he is exceptionally fast, and especially for his weight, and he has that size and speed combination that you want to see at the NFL level. And schematically, when you take Guerendo's size, when you take his speed, and you take that combination and you match it with Kyle Shanahan's offense, it's an absolutely perfect fit for that system. Isaac Guerendo could absolutely feast if he ever finds the field. One thing I just recently mentioned in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server is that both Elijah Mitchell and Isaac Guerendo are currently 2 guys that I am actively trying to get more exposure to in my best ball portfolio. Of course, not on the same best ball team, but I am trying to get both of those guys more frequently in my best ball drafts. Both guys are easy smash picks at their current price tags. Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's draft guide currently has Elijah Mitchell ranked 173 overall, which is well ahead of his 178 ADP. And we have Isaac Guerendo ranked 208 overall, which is ahead of his 217 ADP. All right, let's move on to the wide receivers, beginning with Deebo Samuel, who is entering year 6 in the NFL. He's entering his age 28 season. Currently on drafters.com, Deebo Samuel is being drafted as fantasy's wide receiver 15 around pick 20 overall, which is a mid-second round pick on drafters.com. Do we want to smash or pass on Deebo Samuel at that cost? Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 Draft Guide is a resource that BBFF subscribers are using to dominate their drafts and get ahead of their league mates before that first football is even kicked in week 1. It contains 300 players, and it's complete with rankings that are going to help with tough decisions, tiers that help you plan for future draft picks, 2024 analysis and previews for all 300 players, stoplights that suggest the perfect time to draft a player, wait for a player, or reach for a player that you absolutely must have on your roster, and an ADP tracker that shows you which direction a player is trending in real drafts over the last several weeks. The draft guide is built and maintained with 30 plus hours of weekly research and over 300 real drafts done by yours truly. It's like you're walking into your fantasy draft having done 300 of your own to prepare. It's $14.99 per year, and you can find it using the link that we left for you in the show notes. Put simply, Deebo Samuel is quite literally a top 10 fantasy football wide receiver if he's just on the field with Brock Purdy. He's averaging 16.4 PPR points and 7+ touches per game in 17 career games where he's played at least 56% of the offensive snaps with Brock Purdy. And for context, averaging 16.4 PPR points per game over a 17-game season would have made Deebo Samuel Fantasy's wide receiver 9 overall in 2023. He gives you a solid floor. He gets you 15 or more PPR points nearly 53% of the time. In fact, Deebo Samuel has given you 21 or more PPR points more frequently, about 35.3%, than he's scored under 10 PPR points, about 29.4%. And he has an explosive, week-winning type of ceiling, getting you 34 or more PPR points about 11.8% of the time, with a high of 35.8 during the games that he's played with Brock Purdy. And one thing we just talked about in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server is that while Deebo Samuel technically averaged 15.6 PPR points per game and finished as Fantasy's wide receiver 15 in 2023, which is already solid, if you remove 3 games where Deebo Samuel technically suited up, but he played less than 34% of the team's offensive snaps, basically not playing at all. If you take out those 3 games, Deebo Samuel's average spikes up to 18.2 PPR points per game over those other 14 games that he suited up for. And for context, if you were to average 18.2 PPR points over a full 17-game season last year, that would have made Deebo Samuel Fantasy's wide receiver 4 overall in 2023. And the best part of that is that's with Brandon Aiyuk playing all but one of those games. So he's doing all that damage even despite Brandon Aiyuk being on the field. And when Brandon Aiyuk, a guy who just formally requested a trade on July 16th, when that guy is not on the field, well, this is one of those golden fantasy football nuggets that we're dropping daily inside of Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server. I'm telling you, there's no better way to spend $4.99 per month. But last year with Brock Purdy, but with Brandon Aiyuk playing less than 54% of the offensive snaps or not at all, in those 2 games, Deebo Samuel scored 22.1 points and 25.1 PPR points in the 2 games that Brandon Aiyuk played less than 54% of the snaps or not at all. Obviously, we're talking about a teeny tiny sample size here, but it's pretty clear that if Brandon Aiyuk is not on the field, we know where that football is going to go. As of right now, as of this recording, Deebo Samuel is currently ranked 20th overall and climbing in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 draft guide. He's a smash at his current cost of 20th overall. This is a guy that's just 2 years removed from a wide receiver 3 finish, and we already have talked about the upside that he brings to the table. And of course, we gotta talk about this one, the guy in all the news headlines currently, Brandon Aiyuk. Entering year 5, entering his age 26 season, looking for a massive new contract, looking for a new team if it's not going to be the San Francisco 49ers that give him that second contract. Currently on drafters.com, Brandon Aiyuk is being drafted as Fantasy's wide receiver 16 around pick 22 overall, which is in the late second round on drafters.com. Do we smash or pass on Brandon Aiyuk at that current cost? Really quickly, if you're wondering why drafters.com is my best ball platform of choice, there's really 3 main reasons. Number 1, the ADP is really friendly. The ADP is really soft. There's money to be won. There's prizes and tournaments to be won. Number 2, you can do a fast draft, which is 30 seconds per pick, or you can just rack up a whole bunch of slow drafts all at once because slow drafts allow up to 8 hours per pick. I literally have over 40 drafts going right now as we speak. And number 3, you can join contests for as low as $1.10. Easy platform to play on. You can play on desktop or PC. You can play on the mobile app. And if you're the type of person who enjoys doing a mock draft to get ready for 2024 fantasy football season, I highly recommend instead doing best ball drafts because they're just like mock drafts, but with a little bit of skin in the game, a little bit more fun. If you want to give Drafters a try, I left a link for you down below in the show notes, and if you enter promo code BBFF when you're making your first deposit, Drafters is going to 100% match your first deposit up to $100. It's like you have a free $100 to play fantasy football with. Use promo code BBFF when making that first deposit. Now, Brandon Aiyuk has already been solid with Brock Purdy as his quarterback. In fact, he's averaging 15 PPR points per game in 23 career games where both Brandon Aiyuk and Brock Purdy played at least 68% of the offensive snaps together. And last year, Brandon Aiyuk finished as fantasy's wide receiver 14 in the first season that Brock Purdy played an entire season as the team's starting quarterback. Now, on the downside, Brandon Aiyuk is a bit boom or bust as a fantasy football asset. He has a mediocre floor. He gets you 15 PPR points about 43.5% of the time. But more concerning than that, Brandon Aiyuk scored fewer than 10 PPR points more frequently, about 30% of the time, than he scored 19 or more PPR points, which was just 26.1% of the time. But he does bring you a not so terrible ceiling. He gets you 20 or more PPR points about 21.7% of the time with a high of 32.9 PPR points back in week 1 of last year. Very boom or bust as a fantasy football asset. Now, here is where things get a little bit interesting, especially for a guy that officially requested a trade, a guy that's looking for wide receiver 1 kind of money. I dug into the numbers and I found some really interesting, really fascinating splits for Brandon Aiyuk when Deebo Samuel is and is not on the fantasy football field. And as you can imagine, I dropped all of this valuable information, all of these golden nuggets right inside Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server. I'm telling you, $4.99 per month, that's less than one beer. That's less than one Starbucks for league-winning fantasy football insights, and you can join Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server using the link that we left for you in the show notes below, and you can access it 24/7, 365. But here is a really weird one for a guy who just requested a trade and is looking to be a wide receiver 1. We talked about Brandon Aiyuk averaging 15 PPR points per game in 23 games that he's played with Brock Purdy. Now, that 15 PPR points per game climbs up to 16.4 PPR points per game in 14 games where Deebo Samuel has played 57% or more of the offensive snaps. In other words, in games where Brandon Aiyuk is alongside Deebo Samuel, that average climbs from 15 to 16.4 PPR points per game. However, when in 9 games where Deebo Samuel played fewer than 57% of the offensive snaps or not at all, Brandon Aiyuk goes from 15 PPR points per game down to 12.9 points per game. In other words, if Deebo Samuel is not on the field, Brandon Aiyuk's 15 points per game drop to 12.9 PPR points per game. So while most wide receivers and tight ends and running backs and pretty much anybody in football, while they tend to benefit statistically from the absence of a teammate due to more volume being added to their plate, Brandon Aiyuk appears to do the opposite. He tends to thrive when Deebo Samuel is on the field, and he tends to struggle when Deebo Samuel is off the field. And it makes it really interesting. If nothing else, it makes it really interesting considering Brandon Aiyuk requested a trade. He's looking for wide receiver 1 type of money, and it's fair to wonder if Brandon Aiyuk is capable of being a team's wide receiver 1 when he might be better off just trying to thrive and be an excellent wide receiver 2. But ultimately, the reason we're here is because we are trying to identify whether or not we want to smash or pass on Brandon Aiyuk at his current cost of wide receiver 16, around pick 22 overall, which is a late second round pick on drafters.com. Now, I'm fine with Brandon Aiyuk's cost. I don't hate it, but I also don't like it. It feels like we're drafting Brandon Aiyuk closer to his ceiling than his floor, especially if he makes his way out of San Francisco. I truly think San Francisco is probably the best possible place, maybe except for Buffalo, that Brandon Aiyuk could possibly be. I would much rather have Deebo Samuel. I'd much rather have Cooper Kupp, even a guy like Saquon Barkley, Jalen Waddle, if given the choice. So if I'm forced to choose smash or pass, I'm passing, and I'm going elsewhere. Brandon Aiyuk is currently ranked 24th overall in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's draft guide, but to be quite frank with you, he's not going to be there very long. He's dropping in BBFF's rankings. Now, some other names to know in fantasy football as it pertains to San Francisco 49ers wide receivers are Ricky Pearsall, their 31st overall pick in this year's NFL draft, and Jauan Jennings, both of which will compete for the wide receiver 3 role in San Francisco. Now, that said, last year's 49ers finished dead last in passing attempts. They finished 20th or lower in passing attempts in 5 of the last 6 years, including 26th or lower in 4 of the last 5 years. And they still have Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel. They still have Brandon Aiyuk, technically speaking. They do still have George Kittle, who we'll talk about in a minute. And all 4 of those guys combined totaled 78% of the 49ers' total targets last year, and Jauan Jennings was the next closest in line, totaling just 33 targets across the entire season. Point is that wide receiver 3 role isn't necessarily a fantasy-friendly one in 2024, or as long as all of those guys are in the picture. And again, unless Brandon Aiyuk is traded, neither Ricky Pearsall or Jauan Jennings are going to see enough volume to be able to make a consistent impact in 2024 fantasy football. Of course, if Brandon Aiyuk is traded, well, then we're having an entirely different conversation, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. BBFF's online community and Discord server that's filled with sharp fantasy football brains and NFL fans that are dedicated to helping each other outsmart their friends, dominate their leagues, cash in on NFL bets, and take down DFS contests. You can join us while the cost is less than 1 beer per month using the link that we left for you in the show notes. All right, let's wrap this thing up with George M.F. Kittle, who is entering year 8. He's entering his age 31 season, and on drafters.com, he is currently being drafted as fantasy's number 8 tight end, around pick 73 overall, which is an early 7th round pick on drafters.com. Do we smash or pass on George Kittle at his current cost? Well, let me start out by saying that this guy who's being drafted as fantasy's tight end 8 has been fantasy's tight end 5 or better in 5 of the last 6 seasons, with the lone exception being 2020 when he played in just 8 games. Kittle's been great with Brock Purdy as his quarterback. He's averaging dang near 13 PPR points per game across 27 full contests with Brock Purdy as his quarterback. He offers a safe floor. He's getting you 10 or more PPR points about 56% of the time, including 16 or more PPR points about 41% of the time. He also offers a high ceiling. He's getting you 20 or more PPR points about 22% of the time, including a high of 30 PPR points with Brock Purdy back in week 16 of 2022. He finished as fantasy's tight end number 5 last year, his first full season with Brock Purdy as the team's starting quarterback. And oh, by the way, the best part about all of that success is that it's happened while both Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk have been on the field, at least for the majority of it. And you better believe that if you remove one of those guys from the picture, George Kittle's upside goes absolutely through the roof. And as you can guess, this is something we just talked about in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server. This is where I'm routinely dropping fantasy football nuggets, fantasy football insights as I find them. I want to make sure that my subscribers don't miss a thing, and they have all of the league-winning fantasy football insights that they can possibly use to wreck their friends in 2024. Again, it's less than 1 Starbucks, it's less than 1 beer per month, $4.99, using the links that we left for you in the show notes below. All right, but here we go. Check this out. There have been 18 full games, full contests, where Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, and George Kittle are all on the field together with Brock Purdy. 18 games. George Kittle's averaging about 11.1 PPR points in those 18 games. And for context, averaging 11.1 PPR points per game over a full 17-game season would have made George Kittle Fantasy's tight end 7 in 2023. That's not bad at all in the run-heaviest offense in all of football when Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk are also on the field with George Kittle. And then without one of those guys, there were 19 games where Deebo Samuel and or Brandon Aiyuk played less than 44% of the snaps. And in those 19 games, George Kittle averaged a very nice 6.9 targets per game, but also 16.3 points per game in the 19 contests where either Deebo or Aiyuk did not play at least 45% of the offensive snaps. If you want the context, 16.3 PPR points per game over a full 17-game season would have easily been Fantasy's number 1 tight end in 2023. Heck, that would have been Fantasy's number 9 wide receiver in 2023, and that's the kind of upside that George Kittle is bringing to the table if Brock Purdy is the quarterback, but Deebo Samuel or Brandon Aiyuk is not on the field. It just makes it really fun to wonder, what if Brandon Aiyuk does get traded? All in all, George Kittle is a solid, mid-range tight end 1 whose upside goes through the roof if the 49ers at any point are missing Deebo Samuel and or Brandon Aiyuk. While it feels like we're drafting Brandon Aiyuk closer to his ceiling in 2024, we're definitely drafting George Kittle closer to his floor in 2024, and he looks like an absolute value pick in 2024 fantasy football drafts. He is an absolute smash at his current cost, and he's currently sitting at number 67 overall in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 draft guide. 67 overall is well ahead of his 73 ADP. That's all for today. Hope you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments below who you want me to cover next, and if you have any questions about the 2024 fantasy football landscape whatsoever, whether it's players or strategy or any questions about 2024 fantasy football, leave them in the comments below, and your question just might be asked and be featured in a future episode of Inside the 20 by Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. I will see you on the fantasy football field, and I hope to see you in the basement, which is Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server, an online community of sharp fantasy football players that are dedicated to helping each other dominate in 2024. Cheers, this brew's for you.